Did you entertain it? That was the one thing I was going to ask. Like,
Yeah.
were you sitting there like, you know what?
It could happen, yeah.
Number one team might lose. Because if the number one team loses, like for those of you who are probably aware that Tom and I are on like 12 platforms, we got multiple responsibilities. Number one team losing is one of those like 5-alarm sirens. Yeah, where just all of a sudden a whole content machine kicks into gear where we're going to have all the angles covered. We're probably going to have to do emergency HQ that we weren't even planning on, where who knows, like the limits of the content for a number one Alabama team losing, there are none.
Yeah.
So you've got to very much be already like, wait a second, I need to prepare myself. I think Alabama's about to lose. And I totally thought that was on the table. I'm glad that you did too, because I think that we had 20 minutes where you had to really entertain the fact that the Crimson Tide were going to blow this.
I mean, how could you not think it was a possibility? I mean, it came down to the fourth, it came down to the 2-point conversion. And this is a Florida team that had been mauling Alabama in the trenches the entire day. Well, not the entire day, but for the final 3 quarters. Like, they were beating Alabama up. So, of course, it was on the table.
They were running the ball well. Offensive line did a very, very good job. And then on the flip side, I do think that Alabama and, so my note on my notepad is Alabama wants to be nastier than it is right now. And I can't tell how much of it's Nick Saban, how much of it's Bill O'Brien, how much of it is them signaling to their team what they want to be able to do, and how much of it is them just being stubborn with what they already wish they could do.
I don't think it was Nick Saban or Bill O'Brien today. Like, I know that the gut reaction for most fans whenever things go poorly is to blame a coach or to blame like the play calling, as if 98% of fans really have any kind of understanding of play calling. And I include myself in that. But what I saw watching that game was just Florida averaged 6 yards per carry running the ball because its offensive line was kicking Alabama's defensive line's ass. And Alabama averaged only 3.4 yards per carry because Florida's defensive line was kicking its offensive line's ass. Florida was better in the trenches than Alabama today, and that's what that entire game boils down to. If not for the first quarter and Alabama getting off to a hot start where it was 21-3 after the first quarter, Alabama kicked their butt in the first quarter, but the final 45 minutes of that game, that was all Florida. Like, there's that Florida is suddenly, in my eyes, a good team. I think Florida might be better than Georgia. I know that Georgia's got the win over Clemson, and Georgia's probably still going to be number 2 in the polls when it comes out tomorrow. But as of right now, if Florida plays the way it did today against Georgia in the cocktail party, I think Florida beats them.
I don't think that Florida runs the ball with as much ease as it did against Alabama.
But did you think they would against Alabama?
I have looked at Alabama's defensive line as carrying names with great recruiting profiles without necessarily putting together large amounts of evidence that they are at the very highest levels of college football, true difference makers.
Fair enough. We talked so much about how great Georgia's defense looked.
I mean, I think Jordan Davis's presence changes
no doubt.
Ability to run the game. Yeah.
Georgia's defensive line is it's phenomenal. It's great. But we talked about it in that game against Clemson, like, oh my God, look at that performance. Well, what's Clemson done since? Clemson's offensive line has been terrible against everybody. It was terrible again tonight against Georgia Tech. So maybe Georgia's front seven was just taking advantage of a bad offensive line. And I mean, because it beat the hell out of South Carolina today. I mean, I don't know.
So I do want to clarify. I'm not blaming, but I do think that there were just some decisions, especially when you wanted to go for it on 4th and goal, when you're getting those stops like that. To me, that when I was talking about the signaling, that's what, I don't know if it's Saban. I don't know if it's Bill O'Brien. I don't know if
very fair
the decision-making process. It's like, oh, you guys think that you need to tell your team that on a 4th and short, on a 3rd and short, we get this because we are MF in Alabama and we are going to impose our will. This is an offensive line that has multiple new starters. They were shifting around a lot of those positions going into camp. They want to be able to run the ball when they need to. And the only real thing that worked, and it was so funny because they didn't hit a lot of splash plays of like 30 plus yards. and they couldn't really run the ball in short yardage situations. It was like pretty much just the like short to intermediate stuff. And you can just slowly nibble away because you've got elite athletes like John Mechie and Jameson Williams. And look, like you open things up enough, then yes, you're going to see Jace McClellan, who had some good catches out of the backfield. Brian Robinson will find ways to get some hard yards. I thought there were multiple things that Alabama's offense wished that it could do today that it did not do successfully.
I agree with you on the fourth down call because I would have gone for it on that 4th and 1, but I'm guessing that whoever made that decision, and I got to assume it's Saban who has the final call, was seeing the same thing I was. The offensive line was getting beat up. He probably wasn't confident they were going to get the yard. And he probably says, well, we should just get this field goal to make sure we go up by 8. But
okay.
Another thing, though, maybe I think Bryce Young is scared of being hit.
Oh, and that's right. That is true. That is a good observation.
I think that is impacting what Alabama can do on offense as far as what it's calling with its plays, because there was the one moment where like they got the touchdown out of it, but he could have just walked into the end zone and he might have had to take a hit. But instead, he threw a pass that really had very little chance of being complete. It almost was, but it's like he could have, like, again, he could have just waltzed right into the end zone, maybe had to lower his shoulder and take a hit. And there are other times, not just in that play, but there are just other times where I see Bryce Young kind of like rolling out or standing there, and there's running lanes, and he could take off and maybe get a first down or, whatever, and he doesn't go. And I just get the sense watching him that he's it's either Bryce Young does not want to get hit, or B, the coaching staff, knowing what's behind Bryce Young on the depth chart, maybe not having as much confidence in it, doesn't want Bryce Young taking hits. But I think that is limiting what Alabama can do offensively, whatever the case is.
I think it might be a little bit from the coaching staff.
It might be.
He had one scramble where his slide/dive looked confused. Like he didn't quite decide which one it was. He just kind of crumpled at the feet of the Florida defender after getting the yards he needed for the first down. And it was almost like he potentially was like, wait, what are we doing here? What's the game plan again? I've been coached to do one thing or another.
Maybe, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But at the same time, like, even if your coaches don't want you, there was a touchdown there. I would say, sorry, coach, I scored a touchdown.
Mm-hmm. Tom Fornelli thinks California kid Bryce Young doesn't have the killer instinct. Coming up next on the Cover 3.
Hey, I don't want to get hit by a Florida safety either. I'm not judging him for it. I'm just saying I think that's the case.
Yeah. And again, as always, put me as a punt returner and watch me do fair catch.
Oh God,
10 times out of 10.
I'm not even fair catching. I'm just fire drill. Get away.
Peter.